Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, George McMillan III. George, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great, as always.
As always, George is great. For everybody who's new here, hi, welcome. This is a comedy show. Everything we say here is a joke, and nothing has anything to do with reality. Now that that is out of the way, George is an old-time comedian here. We've done a lot of comedy shows. There's even a playlist with George's comedy routines. Today we're going to pick up on one that he has been doing for a while and that we have been covering often, let's say. The culmination of a lot of his work, I would say, at least, so far. George, unified behavioral theory? Yeah, that's what we're doing today?
Yeah, we went over, when I started doing the 7Ps and the geopolitical stuff over the last couple of years, people, by looking in the comment section, people are like, oh, you ought to read this. You don't know. People need an idea of the underlying methodology so they understand the amount of books I've read, to get to these points. So these are the underlying methodologies that's behind my geopolitical analysis and my domestic analysis in the 7P papers. So this is the unified behavioral theory. It's got an overarching philosophical architecture that leads to the landscape of the social sciences. Okay, why is that a big deal? Tooby and Kosmides were arguing that the landscape of the social sciences isn't even defined. The social sciences are a complete mess of chaotic nonsense. Once the liberal professors took over in the 1980s, they took over the department chairs. They abandoned the scientific project. And how would you correct this problem? They wrote that article in 1992. We also talked about Alan Bloom closing the American mind. He's arguing that the Frankfurt School basically and postmodernists came in. They wiped out the classical ancient Greek government form theories, took out the nomos physis distinction between laws of man and the laws of nature. When they're more congruent, you have a proper form of government. And when they're not congruent, you have a perverted form of government. So that leads to the research design of once the Cold War ended, the free market theory should have been confirmed as more congruent with male and female forms of competing for resources and mates. Those are your two primary emotional drives. The Marx-Engels theory should have been wiped out across the board, or Rousseau-Marx-Engels, I should say, in the 7P plans. It should have been wiped out across the board. Instead, the social sciences went into third way politics after the 90s when Soviet collapse here in the United States. Instead of scrapping it, they did another iteration of it. They actually made it worse. It's based on the works of Foucault and Derrida. Deconstruction, but deconstruction is not construction. So scientific method is constructing. You're reevaluating theories according to human behavior, and then you're throwing out the erroneous ones, and then you should be trying to consolidate the more accurate ones. So that's what I've done. So you got the philosophical architecture is I took the Hume-Smith models because there's only two teams that tried to do a logically coherent foundational political, economic, geopolitical philosophy. Adam Smith, Marx-Engels. So if you're wiping out the Marx-Engels theory, everything should have gravitated towards a Hume-Smith model. But in modern day context, foundational philosophy is now broken into evolutionary theory, and you get even more in depth because it has to be, obviously it's going to be post-Darwinian evolutionary theory, but it also has to be post-Watson and Crick DNA theory, because with so much of evolutionary theory, after they've been able to do DNA testing on the different anthropological bones that they found all over the world, in the caves and stuff like that. They can do a lot more genetic testing over migration flows. And so a lot of evolutionary theories got tossed, from the 90s into 2000s. So narrow evolutionary theory got a lot better defined. Post-Freudian theory would be the next one. The radical feminists came in, and Rousseau, and based on the writings of Rousseau, you got to get rid of marital rights, property rights, pretend that men and women would be the same if they're trained the same. They threw out all the gender differentiated post-Freudian theories, basically, just to be real short. There was enough to make the field of psychology into a singular schematic by the early 1970s. It got discarded. I came in by upgrading Lipsitz some social requisites of democracy. He was trying to correlate democratic forms of government to economic growth levels and how to move third world countries to first world standards. Well, he wrote that article in 1959. Since then, the field of economics developed advanced general equilibrium theories and Solow-Swan economic growth models. So you had enough to take all of Aristotle's 6 forms of government, which has the full range of human behavior, and attach it to advanced growth models. And then I have my 4-category geopolitical form model, which first and second world is higher economic growth levels, lower population growth levels. So you have a tighter wage labor market. Less developed countries, the third and fourth world countries, fourth world being failed states, they tend to have lower economic growth, higher population growth. So they have a catastrophically loose wage labor rate. Right there, you have a system of macro theories of Aristotle's 6 forms of government. I used a per capita GNP ratio to signify economic growth theories over population growth rates of change correlated to the 4 government forms. And then you're tracking the 2 trends of technology and population growth over time. We're going to get into those charts in a minute. And then the 2 secondary trends of jobs moving to the global south. The global south, their population keeps doubling, and doubling. And then they're moving north. So globally, you can make a few statements here. The global wage labor rate is necessarily plummeting globally. And all countries the tendency is going to be towards every country becoming a fourth world failed state. If you have free mass migration and third world or developing world population keeps on expanding, yes, then all the tendency with open borders and mass migration was that everything becomes a dysfunctional fourth world failed state because it's going to move towards a catastrophically loose wage labor rate. Why do I say this? This is the global atmospheric condition that all countries are operating in and have different courses of action of handling that. The West has gone to open borders, mass migration. China and Russia have not. Japan has not, and South Korea has not. So you get into some different areas. So the key here is several takeaways. You can move the whole philosophical and social sciences into one 2-force physics style model, which is the holy grail. So it took human beings, 2,500 years to be able to do this since the writings of Plato and Aristotle. Yes, I've done it. I've done it at a time where the university system's been destroyed. So it needs to be rebuilt. All right, the general applications to it are huge. They're the underlying frameworks. These are the underlying frameworks I use in my 7P plan, domestic analysis, and my geopolitical land power versus sea power analysis that's in my geopolitical models. So from that basis, we're going to pick up on Aristotle's 6 forms of government because it's got value neutral form of rule of the one, rule of the few, rule of the many. The proper forms are monarchy, aristocracy, and constitutional democracy, or a republic, versus the perverted forms of tyranny, despotism, oligarchy, and mob rule democracy, which is what we have now. So it's got a constructive versus destructive behavioral dynamic to it that correlates to Eric Fromm's productive versus sadomasochistic character orientation. So your cluster A, B, and C disorder profiles are all in the sadomasochistic side. The productive character orientation, what's the chief characteristic? It is a good work ethic. All the cluster A, B's, and C's has some form of dysfunctional non-work ethic. The grifters, the control freaks, people like that. Okay, so you have a constructive versus destructive behavioral dynamic that you can link post-Freudian psychological theories, the ones that are based on the two gender domain specific premise linked. They're based on a core peripheral methodology in personality theories. That is a value neutral bifurcated dichotomy, the same thing as Eric Fromm's. So those psychological personality theories link directly to Aristotle's 6 forms of government. So you get a micro to macro behavioral model that goes from individual psychology, family group psychology, small social dynamics, all the way up to big political. And then, okay, I'm linking the politics to the economics and the geopolitical side. So you have one big, massive behavioral model now that all links together. What you're bringing over from the economic side is you're adding a resource constraint dichotomy to the behavioral side. People, if you have a good, constructive, positive behavioral dynamic under resource constraint ratios, people will fight over resources. So to have a first world country or a second world evolving country, you have to have a constructive behavioral dynamic with enough resources to keep it constructive. So it's a combination.
This was me being constructive this whole time. This was like a 10-minute monologue of George with me not making any jokes. Did you see that? Like I popped up these 2 coffee things twice for people to like buy me a coffee for not interrupting you, basically. Also, did you see this meme? History in school, history as a hobby.
Oh, right.
Isn't it so true?
Well, I mean, I did this out of a university system because I was working on it. Because I could see people in economics had used the per capita GNP function the way I'm using it, because it means go down to slide 19 now.
I wanted to draw attention to George's new slide set, which is now colored. It's in like patriotic Slavic colors, also known as the red, white, and blue American colors. Was America your motif, or was the Russian and Serbian flag your motif?
I was going to use pretty much the American flag colors, but I couldn't find the other version where I had the blue on top.
So the yellow is from that. The yellow is from that Galveston American flag, right? in this presentation.
The Gadsden flag. Yeah, the Gadsden flag. Yeah, okay.
That's what it's called. There you go. Yeah. So tell me, let's chit chat a bit, because this is a talk. It's not a lecture. Tell me about what's going on in the U.S., because it is the 17th of the 10th as we record this. So the Florida thing just happened, and before that other thing just happened, and there's all kinds of like conspiracy theories that, like, first of all, it was steered, the hurricane, and second of all, there's like talk that there's like lithium mines in that area in Carolina.
Yeah.
Is any of that true? Like, do you know anything about that? Like, what's your word? What's the word on the street in the U.S.?
Yeah, all of that is more than likely true. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of rare earth metals in the Appalachian Mountains. The problem is you would have to strip mine them and create an ecological disaster to get them out. In Afghanistan, there's a whole, there's tons of rare earth metals over there also. The good thing about Afghanistan is since nothing grows there, it's all desert and rocks. You could literally strip mine the place, and then when you're done, just push the dirt back over where it was, and you would have people wouldn't notice the difference. You wouldn't create an ecological disaster. So yeah, there is lithium mines there. I don't know how they can get it out without creating an ecological disaster. The left is supposed to be against that.
I heard there was like a town that was like right wing, and they didn't want to give in to this like mining thing, and now the town doesn't exist anymore because it was washed away basically by the floods. Like the whole town.
Yeah, it's a little bit too convenient. And yes, when I was a kid, growing up, late 60s and early 70s. Okay, I didn't have any, gray hair back then, obviously, but when I was in grade school, yeah, they talked about crowd. They were talking very, very positively about cloud seeding and where it was going. You wouldn't have another Midwestern Dust Bowl like they had in the 1920s or 30s, whenever that 1930s.
Yeah,
that's what they were advertising it back then when I was a little kid. So. Yeah, I've been watching on the show Redacted. They've been got a lot of people talk about that frequently. So from what I learned as a little kid, they were really proud of it. And now all of a sudden they're pretending that A, they didn't pursue the technology, and B, they wouldn't do it when, from working overseas so long, I've realized they do a lot of things that they say that they don't do. So I don't.
So let's get back to your white paper slides, shall we?
And we will not give any examples of those things either.
I have no idea what you're talking about, George. It's probably some Russian time traveling propaganda, as we like to label it here. So you said move on to 19. Should I do my British accent?
Oh yeah, you could do that if you want.
Economic growth and population growth. Proportions, the dependent variable. The macro-dependent variable is filled by the per capita gross national product ratio, signifying the economic growth rates of change, population growth rates of change. Now the per capita GNP ratio. What's GNP ratio? Oh, gross demand. Okay.
On the right side, it has it written out. I just have it in the short form of C plus I plus G over N people. But that's consumer spending plus investment plus government spending over the amount of people you have in the population. I guess I have it written out in the other slides. But, I'm used to talking to people that study economics, so I just say that. But yeah, it signifies economic growth over population growth proportions. It can signify supply over demand proportions. So when you're doing economic growth theories, it's economic supply over demand. But if it also links economics and demography, or you can say it's linking economics over an n-person polity. So the per capita GNP ratio is a way to access into general equilibrium theories or solo swan type models.
What's a polity?
Say again?
What is a polity? You said n-person polity. What is a polity?
Oh, a poll. Well, in ancient Greek thought, it's your electorate, it's your citizenry.
Okay.
Back then they just had city states, so it was polls was
like
meant politics.
The polis, like the populace basically, but only the ones that are able to vote basically. Yeah, got it.
Correct. Yeah, it's your electorate, your voting constituency. So by having, if you look at it like it's economic growth over an in-person polity, well, then it's also linking economics to politics and political theory, government forms. So it links to every field inside, every subfield inside the field of economics, and it links to all the different fields next to the field of economics. So that's why I'm using it, because it's the quantitative crossroads of the philosophical and social sciences, because if you're going to wipe out the Rousseau, Marx, Engels model on a behavioral basis that leaders act nothing like what Marx and Engels predicted they would once they get control, they act like tyrants in their areas as much as they can get away with. If you're wiping that out and you're going to a Hume-Smith model, well, Adam Smith's been mathematized by post-Walrasian, post-Pareto schools of thought. It was Walras that started drawing supply and demand curves at the Lausanne School. And then Pareto was an engineer that worked for a metallurgical company, a steel company, and then went and got his PhD at Lausanne and really mathematized the discipline. Then it started becoming much more mathematical over time. So that was, early 20th century going to the late. Now everything is heavily into mathematics. And of course, the more you can do data collection, the more accurate you can get your mathematics, because your mathematics is a theory based on what you think people are going to do. You have to weigh it against what people actually do. But since Google and Amazon and these places know everything you buy every second of the day, when you buy something and they scan it in, it's tracking how much goods are going to each store, and then, and how to replace it. And then the computers automatically send that to the wholesalers to buy more of it. So now these supply and demand feedback loops are instantaneous, and they're globally connected through the web. So now you can get the data collection side.
I have to be a comedian and remind you that there are also smart fridges which do that part for you from like, your fridge. Basically, they track the RFIDs on the side of your milk, and they realize when you're low on milk and when you throw it out, and they can order it for you from the fridge. Like the fridge does it by itself. You don't have to be involved, nor does the store.
Yeah. They need, just wait till you get smart toilet seats. Okay, moving right along. Yes, everything in your house is bugged. Yes, it is. We did several videos on the surveillance state in regard to people's health.
Yes, I might leave a link somewhere.
Yes. Okay. The surveillance state can have a negative impact on some people's health, including our own.
Economic growth and population growth proportions, the dependent variable. The idea is to simplify the complex mathematics of various types of economic theory and statistical models to the PC-GNP ratio as a placeholder, and then build a complex behavioral model around it. The chart at the right explains why the PC ratio is the quantitative crossroads of the philosophical and social sciences. On the right is probably this one, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been talking about. So you have Aristotle's 6 forms of government, because it starts out with the value neutral, then proper and perverted forms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in the core periphery format, just like they use in psychological personality theories. Aristotle's 6 forms of government is the qualitative crossroads of the philosophical and social sciences. It then matches with the per capita GNP ratio, which is the quantitative crossroads of the philosophical and social sciences. And what I was explaining before was, since everything that Hume Smith have written can now be replaced by this model, meaning you can mathematize the whole area of philosophy from foundational, political, economic, and geopolitical ends of it. There is no excuse. 90% of what they teach in philosophy right now is complete nonsense. It went into Richard Rorty, Wittgenstein, complete nonsense, and Derrida and deconstructionism and Foucault and stuff like that. And it's complete nonsense. You can get rid of it and replace the whole field with hard models now. There's no reason not to mathematize every square inch of the philosophical and social sciences. No reason. Other than the fact that I'm not very popular in a lot of circles. I wrote a paper a few years ago. I just posted on LinkedIn. The field of philosophy, the philosophy professors that are in the major universities do not have enough methodological training to actually advance their discipline. They've been devolving it. Anyway, this is the basis of why I'm making those arguments.
Why do you think this is exclusive to the philosophy sector of the educational circles?
When did I say it was exclusive? we went over that. That was the purpose of going over the 7P plan. If you look at Alan Bloom, 1988, Closing the American Mind, he says they took out the objective standards and measures. Well, you had, and we got this in the next section, but you have Lipset he's got the right sequence. The government form linked to some kind of economic factors, and then how to move countries from third world status to first world status. Well, I took the same political, economic, demographic, but with the advances in economics, now I can go to the full form of Aristotle's 6 forms of government. I can go, that covers the full range of behavior. The 4-category geopolitical form model covers the full range of human behavior. So when the Frankfurt School or the postmodernists come in and they start talking about, like, Geertz, or, well, just everybody, you can interpret reality any which way you want. Well, no, you can't. You have a finite amount of government forms, and you have a finite amount of geopolitical forms. Less developed countries, more developed countries, measured by a tight versus catastrophically loose wage labor rate. You have a constructive versus destructive behavioral reality. You have economic growth over population growth, resource constraint reality. So you have your multidimensional axes here. Actually, 3-dimensional. We'll get to that.
Are you denying that there's 72 genders?
No, my belief is that there's only 57, just like ketchup.
Just like ketchup, not like Baskin Robbins. By the way,
no,
that's a great segue. That's a great segue.
Anyway,
this channel is not eligible for monetization, so thanks to everybody who's still a patron, and thanks to everybody who's bought me a coffee, all that good stuff. George, continue. Sorry, I had to do that.
Right. So I go back to, and the next section starts off with a particular discussion on Lipset, because the social, okay, Truby and Kosminas are arguing from the field of evolutionary biology. They don't know why the social sciences are so messed up. They just know that they are. I'm in political science, political philosophy, and I'm studying economics and psychology, and I'm finding, oh no, everybody in all the other disciplines has systematized their disciplines. The left just came in and got rid of it. But because I use these 2 frameworks, and then I went out one direction towards psychology and added that framework, and then, taking first, second, third world and just adding a fourth world failed state and making it consistent with population growth economics or growth with equity theories of the left. Well, you're bumping up, adding one category and mathematizing, taking the subjective first, second, third world categories and making it an objective, 4-category system. I mean, it's easy. It's a 1-foot putt. So actually, mathematizing the social sciences shouldn't be that hard across the board. Mathematics already exists. I don't have enough money to.
What is this chart that we're looking at? I mean, we refer to it here, but you want to lay it out for us?
Yeah, just so anyway. Let me switch sides real quick.
21.
Because my point was they abandoned the social sciences by the time that everything existed. This slide set here should have been done by somebody else decades ago. When they destroyed the university system, all I did was just put these things back. And yes, the whole social sciences can go into a two-force physics model. All right. Significance of this slide set. John Hersay was talking in the early 60s about you need an integrated causal model that laterally integrates the disciplines. And he laid out several criteria for doing that. Well, physics models are based on two-force physics models. He's an ultra math genius. He's a Hungarian guy that knew von Neumann Morgenstern, who developed game theory and the theory of games and economic behavior in 1944. They did that at Princeton. So these guys are like wanted to know how come economics is getting so well systematized.
Do you want to give us a TLDR version? Do you want to give us a too long didn't read version of game theory for people who have like maybe no idea what game theory is?
I don't talk to those people.
But those people might have accidentally clicked on this comedy show. They need to understand the joke.
All right. Go ahead.
No, can you like sum it up like game theory? Like, cause I don't think I understand it well enough to like present it to somebody who doesn't know. Like, I know the idea of it, but I don't know the intricacies of what actually game theory is in order for me to explain it to a layman. Let's put it that way. So can you sum up what game theory is?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I personally haven't looked at it in probably 15 years. It's in a way you kind of stumped me because now I got to think back where I was, almost like 2 decades ago. But yeah, you start off with it started by trying to put people in contrived situations to see what they would do, and what they found out was, how people calculate risk and odds they thought the field would go a lot farther than it did, but mathematically, after you get past 2 or 3 moves, the amount of moves one player can do against another become so radically increased, there's no way to put it on paper and for it to reflect real life. It did evolve with strict rules of cooperative versus non-cooperative games. So, boy, I'm really stretching my memory here. It goes back to Professor Tucker at Princeton in his prisoner dilemma theory of if both prisoners cooperate and don't talk, then they both go free. So it depends on a cooperative game between those two people. But if one is offered a deal to rat the other one out, then one goes free and the other one, spends his life in jail or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or the worst case scenario is they both rat each other out instantaneously trying to get a deal, and they both go to jail for life. Try to dumb it down, and so game theory evolved from from Professor Tucker's prisoner dilemma models. So they just call it Tucker PD models. So then it started to start discussing the basic incentive is for somebody to defect first from a cooperative alliance. So you start to understand human behavior. Yeah, the person that rats the other one out first is the one that gets better off. So periods of high cooperation are actually people really have to trust each other or be dependent upon each other. So it starts to delve into that psychology. Now, you can't get into that psychology by math. After you do a couple of different moves mathematically, the results start to become unwieldy. So it kind of stopped. Where it really picked up again was with John Maynard Smith's evolutionary game theory. So that goes into hawk and dove games. And then this starts to make more sense too, because if somebody's over aggressive, they get injured in the wild. An animal gets injured in the wild and dies. Because then if it breaks a leg, there's no one to feed it. They don't have hospitals like we do. They just don't eat and then they die. But if you're too passive, if you're too much like a dove, you're not aggressive enough to go kill food, well, then you die of starvation a different way. So it's like trying to figure out what the happy medium is. In classical game theory, it was developed by ultra physics math geniuses that were calculating odds and probabilities, and they're like, okay, only 1% of the population can do that at any given time anyway, and do those ultra mathematicians actually live that way? Well, no. You go into people just have a gut feeling of what their comfort levels is. So it's a way to do cost benefit analysis or risk reward analysis is what game theory is trying to do. So game theory and decision theory in financially or in war gaming are very closely aligned. I got to go to a game theory conference in SUNY Stony Brook back in 2006. I just happened to be presenting papers that year. And in the end of 2005, Thomas Schelling and Robert Allman happened to win it that year. And they were at the conference, along with a handful of other people that eventually went on to share Nobel Prizes. Lloyd Shapley was there. The person that went over my models was Roger Myerson from Chicago. I talked to John Nash extensively, but he's a really weird guy. The person I talked to the most was Thomas Schelling in decision theory, because his focus was on 1950s, early 60s mutually assured destruction and triad theory regarding nuclear exchanges. Okay, prisoner dilemma theory to nuclear exchange theory. The people that shoot first have a higher chance of winning than the people that shoot second. So then MAD theory works on, well, peace depends upon the other side having a second strike capability. So how do you get a second strike capability? You get into nuclear triad theory. You have land-based silos, you have submarines, and then you have
Kim Jong-un.
Then you have airplanes, and then mobile rockets. So then MAD theory is based on different types of movable sea, land, and air nuclear warheads. So I talked to him about that. But game theory and decision making theory in real life is people can't really calculate odds. You need an accurate numerator and an accurate denominator. And how do you get that? I mean, they couldn't even get that during COVID. I mean, that's why that was so ridiculous. They're coming up with these different mortality rates that are nonsense. Unless you test 100% of the population in a given area, you can't come up with an accurate numerator or an accurate denominator.
George,
so, what's that?
Shall we get back to the slides?
Oh, no, you asked me about game theory. We're talking about game theory.
Yeah, but I think you covered it. For somebody who doesn't want to talk to people who don't know about game theory, you went pretty deep. I think we got like a very, very in-depth intro to game theory, and you brought up some names and some history that I don't think would have come up on any Google search. Plus, you tied the all three different game theory variants that I popped up on screen and the history thereof. And people who are more interested can go look into it themselves. Now let's get back to your slides, because we're like 38 minutes in and we've gotten through like 4 slides, maybe.
Well, you're asking me these extraneous questions,
What can I say? Plus, I have to keep it. I have to keep it comedic, so I have to keep interrupting you.
All right.
Otherwise, who knows? But people might think it's not a comedy show.
Yesterday, Stu Turley, I was going to do a geopolitical slide set with him, and he started out by doing what you did and wanted me to comment on a whole bunch of random video clips. So we were literally talking for about an hour and 15 minutes, and we actually never discussed the slide set at all. We got to do that next time. So people enjoy just asking me, just start asking me random ass questions just to comment off the top of my head. People do enjoy that. I'm not sure.
I've got.
But Yeah.
The audience definitely enjoys it. The audience definitely enjoys
Oh,
it,
they do.
and
Okay.
they enjoy your sarcastic and subtle humor. I was gonna say there's a lot of things to talk about since we last talked. Like there's a lot of world events that tie into all kinds of specific theories and equations that we've discussed, but I didn't want to bother you with all that now, considering we've got so much of this to get through. So let's.
Yeah, I just want to get through this because people need some kind of indications of what my models are.
How
Because I mean,
how
if
many
you know what my
slides?
models are, the
How many
background, then you just
slides? How many slides
yeah,
are we
just
planning
load
to
it.
do today? Like until where were you planning to go?
Oh, as far as we can go. I mean, I'll just sit here and just if you want to stop it at some point and then restart. But let's finish. Let's finish. Yeah, let's just do at least a few more slides if you want to stop and restart.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't looked at my slides. I'm busy doing the other ones. I haven't done
Let's do another
this
three,
slide.
four here.
Okay. So, all right. The mathematizing of the field of economics started with Walras and Pareto at the Lausanne School, and they started supply and demand curves. And then, yes, you get other mathematician economists that start slowly building those things out. So you get these super compound ratios and how to measure certain things. So Solow Swan models started talking about, well, technology and population growth was the two trends that we're talking about, right? So every bit of technology means people are having more tools and more power tools. People produce more with tools than without them. People produce more if you can get consumer products out of the ground, whether it be mineral or agricultural or oil and gas. You have to get it out. You have to get it to processing plants to turn into a consumer market, and then you need to distribute it to the consumers, and you have to have finance aspect of liquidity, velocity of money, to lubricate those transactions, make them go faster. So economic theory is about spinning that cycle faster and faster. So with more infrastructure of communications and transportation, because you need transportation to get raw materials out of the ground for to into manufacturing facilities to turn it into a consumer product, then go sell it. You need roads, railroads, ships, whatever it takes to move these items where they can be processed and then redistributed again. You also need people to be able to get on a telegraph or a phone or email to say, I need this, I need that. So you get telecommunications and transportations increases human activity. So how do you measure that? So economic growth models started factoring in, well, if you increase this much highway infrastructure, it's going to lead to roughly this much more economic productivity. If you add railroads, it lowers costs and has a cost savings and efficiency to the consumer. So you're raising your living standards and decreasing your inflation rate because you're decreasing costs. So you're producing more, people can consume more. So how do you factor each one of these things in to an equation to say this much more infrastructural or structural growth investment? So your per capita GDP is your consumer plus and private sector investment plus government spending. If government spending is only on infrastructure, then income boosts. These models start reflecting that. Typically, the more transfer payments a government does, the less it produces, the more people consume, and just your inflation rate goes up. And the social welfare benefits really detract from that. All right, so the Solo Swan models is the end state of how far these factors are went from simple supply and demand measures, let's say, to very intricate complex mathematical models that are now linked with the internet to real-time purchasing power models. So you can correlate your theory to real-time statistics. So both got more accurate. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Mathematizing the wealth of nations.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I started off with the Hume-Smith model because you're doing an a priori hypothesis of well, not an ideal form of government. They didn't do it. They weren't ideology people, but it would improve human behavior. Marx and Engels, purported that communism would lead to increased production. Well, you had the Russian famine and you had the Holodomor. And then
Did you, George? Did you, or is that really propaganda? Anyway, we'll pretend for the sake of your argument that you did. Keep going. that it wasn't induced.
I know. Oh, trust me, I know. The point here, I was just going to hit the surface level on that. I wasn't going to talk about any of the rivalries that may have contributed to that. But again, Marx's thought was under the conditions of communism, those rivalries would go away. No, they didn't go away. They were exacerbated. Same thing in China.
It's like the Tito Stalin falling out.
It doesn't matter where you practice it. The rivalries within that polity increase, they do not decrease. Marxism was supposed to be the international brotherhood of the proletariat, or in Maoist terms, the farmers. And then it just turned, the ethnic infighting radically increased. It didn't decrease. So it did the opposite of what Marx and Engels predicted it would.
All right, moving on.
And yes, if you start to talk about how these rivalries are exacerbated by Marxism, Marxists get upset. Yes, they do. Anyway, I'm a little bit sick and tired of Marxists getting upset.
Are you alluding that I'm a Marxist who's upset? I'm not a Marxist, nor am I upset. Nor do I take anything you say seriously.
Oh no!
When we record or offline, category geopolitical form model. Oh, you weren't done?
I wasn't referring to you this time.
yeah, sure, buddy. Don't call me buddy, guy. Mathematizing the wealth of nations. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations was mathematized and upgraded by post-Walras and post-Pareto style modeling. This is like gibberish to me, man. It's not even Greek.
Well, Walras and Pareto are from the Lausanne school.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would make everything. That makes it all click together now.
Yeah. So anyway, Pareto was he was an engineering student in Genoa, and
I think you discussed him before. I'm joking. I think you discussed him before a couple of times.
Then the Arrow-de-Broglie models were in general equilibrium theories. So everything to mathematize the Adam Smith can now be transferred into the geopolitical side and the political science side, and mathematize those areas in philosophy also. So go to the next one, since I already talked about that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, here's the outcome measure. I already went over more developed countries or high population growth, lower developed countries are lower economic growth, higher population growth. Catastrophically loose wage labor rate is the continuum that these things would fall on. Less developed countries have catastrophically loose wage labor rates. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So here we're starting. We just went through the 5 frameworks going from left to right. Now we're going to go backwards. Oh, okay. Yeah. With Tubin Kosmides created the integrated causal model based on the 2-gender domain specific premise, and they start talking about evolutionary stable strategies. The 2-gender premise is a 2-gender strategy. Religions tend to reinforce culturally the 2-gender status. So by Marx and Rousseau, Marx Engels thought lineage, they took away religion and went to atheism to do away with property rights or marital rights, because to Rousseau, those were the causes of inequality. And we did that. Now the West is largely evolutionary stable on strategy. Birth rates have fallen. They say in South Korea, they're having 1 child per couple. Well, they don't even have couples anymore. So now the birth rate is just plummeting, and South Korea won't even exist in a few decades. So yes, the West and the developed countries are no longer evolutionary stable. Same thing in Portugal and really just across the West. So, and then psychologically unstable, if we discussed it in your chat, with the increase of Marxism, and the breakdown of the nuclear family, you're having more cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, psychological disorders, not less. So it's becoming psychologically unstable. Then, okay, the United States is $36 trillion in debt almost. We're going into $1 trillion in debt every year just to pay the interest on the debt.
I don't think it's almost. I think I saw a video of it counting down. I think it's now officially $36 trillion in debt. Hold on, let me find the debt clock. You keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, it's now going so fast. We're 10 years, 15 years ahead of schedule. It's now going so fast. I can't even, I should have a debt clock up in the next to all my other clocks, right? So we're becoming politically, economically, demographically, and geopolitically unstable as we speak. So all my frameworks have some kind of instability.
35,711. So no. But
okay. Well, we're
at this rate, not long. Next time we record.
It used to take us a decade to hit $1 trillion. Now we're doing it in a quarter. All right. So this slide set here starts talking about, since they took out the scientific project out of the university system, remember the 7P plans, take my frameworks, keep on applying them. Mm-hmm. They destroyed the university system and then are taking over the other institutions, and they're destroying them. Now every area of our life is becoming unstable in that particular area across the board. And the left thinks that when they take over, they're going to make everything better, by the way. But you can use this chart. No, everything is going to go the wrong direction because they're based on Rousseau, Marx, Engels thought lineage, which should have been thrown out 3 decades ago. All right. Why I digress. We go to 25.
Oh, finally, we got to the map. We were going to start here. We covered most of this in the last talk or the one before that, but go on. Parallaxing? Parallaxing? Parallaxing.
Parallax is in a rifle scope. We're doing paralleling.
Paralleling.
Yeah.
Go on.
If you have your data collection in the social sciences, theoretically, the discipline of philosophy should be feeding into that data. We have absolutely incompetent philosophy departments in the West that can't correlate, that don't even know that they should be even looking at parallel. It's unbelievable. The competence of our university system is unbelievable. But yeah, this is tracking the two secondary trends of of jobs moving south and people moving north, because the north is no longer evolutionary stable. We moved our jobs overseas thinking that they would economically develop and then their birth rates would fall and everything would go into an equilibrium. But go to the next chart.
If you guys are wondering why I'm smirking because I'm observing the chat in the background, and boy, are there some things that I can't tell you about. You just have to be there in chat. Find the working brother on Telegram. Global population control. No, not control. Why am I being super dyslexic today? Global population growth outpacing global economic growth. That's bad, right?
Yeah, that's real bad. That means your wage labor rate is going down, not up.
That's why the poor
are going down, not up. See, we don't have time to go to my other slides, but when you move to socialism, you're taking money out of private sector investment and structure, and the government isn't focusing on infrastructural development that's going to increase productivity. It hands it out and increases demand. And then you have inflation. When you have inflation, it's a wealth transfer to the wealthy. So you have a catastrophically loose wage labor rate. So if you own a large corporation, or if you manage, run one, or are involved in one, you're going to get a high salary because you're paying less and less in wages by shipping your wages overseas. That's what that mass migration chart was partly about. So you're going to pay less in wages, but your global demand is increasing. So your demand for your product is going to increase, but your wages are going down. You're making more profit. So under high population growth conditions, the wealthier get wealthy. Now, if that money went back into investment to increase structure manufacturing processes, that would mean that economic growth can to some degree catch up. But what the Marxists always do is they say, no, there's income disparity. We're going to hand more out. We're going to take more out of the investment class, and we're going to hand it out and play Santa Claus. Then your economic growth falls and your population growth continues. So both your numerator and your denominator go in the wrong direction. And it is highly predictable. Yet the left does this every single time, which is also highly predictable. So that's what these rate charts are about. Here, most of your population growth is in the developing world. It's got it broken down to Africa is in red, and your biggest population growth centers are in Southern Asia. India's population's been doubling every 30 years, since 1900, just like Mexico. Well, Mexico leveled off, but their population growth hasn't leveled off. It does keep on doubling. I think Mexico since 1975 went from doubling every 25 years to more like doubling every 40 years, so it slowed down, but not India. And not even Myanmar and well, no, Thailand's leveled off. Well, Cambodia leveled off because of the Khmer Rouge. Population's kind of rebounded in Vietnam, but
that's such an American thing to say. What do you mean because of the Khmer Rouge? What do you mean because you don't think it might have been maybe because of Agent Orange?
No, that was largely, that would be Western Cambodia, but the deaths occurred south and the east. South and west, I mean.
No comment.
Yeah, the Agent Orange thing is mostly dumped on the border between Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia.
When are you gonna go back to your Southeast Asian motorcycle rides? You've been Americanized a little bit too much, man. You're spewing that American propaganda that you're getting off of CNN. It's just it's got this aftertaste.
Oh, you know what I need to do? I need to I didn't throw in long-range condensative wave cycles in this. because he was
What?
the one really good Russian economist, and he did quantitative wave cycles. Is if you introduce a new technology, it takes decades and decades for every single sector to absorb and utilize that new technology, and then you hit an economic plateau until another major invention comes along and revitalizes society where everybody reinvests in everything, and you get another productivity increase. So you call these quantitative long wave cycles. He produced that theory by the time he was 40, and instead of, well, he was rewarded by Stalin and sent to the gulags, which is a long story. So yeah, I should have included quantitative because then I would have at least one Russian
You know what
economist.
You know what I
And then
recently heard about Stalin and the gulags? They first of all, the gulags weren't set up by Stalin; they were set up by the Trotskyites, supposedly.
Yeah,
And then
that's true.
And then
That's true.
apparently most of the people that Stalin sent to the gulags were the Trotskyites who set up the gulags in the first place. Apparently. This is what I heard.
Oh,
you know.
yeah, there's a lot of well. Yeah, the Trotskyites is a good way of putting it.
We're yeah, of course that's the like publicly consumable version. We're over the 1 hour mark, George. Do you want to touch
All right.
on global atmospherics? And I'll pop up another 2-3 memes about those
Yeah, we can end it here because I already talked about this. Your two global trends are technology and population growth, necessarily having a declining wage labor equilibrium rate. And under these circumstances, you're going to have either if you had a zero immigration problem going from south to north, then you would have a cascading set of fourth world failed states in the southern hemisphere. But by having an open immigration problem, you're going to forestall the problem for a decade or two. Okay, those decades are kind of up. Then you're going to have a cascading set of bankruptcies in the first world. That's where we are approaching now. Oh, I do want to talk about that chart for just a second.
Go on.
We've discussed it before, but for those who haven't watched before or forget, it took 150,000 years since hominids have been on the planet for the human race to have 100 billion, have a billion people on the planet by 1804. From 1804 to 2010 or whatever, you're tipping at the 8 billion point. So globally, you're having a logarithmic population growth between 1900 and 2000. If you go back to the chart up top again, go up one.
Yep.
Here you go. Most of the population growth is in the global south. Go down to 29.
Yep.
Yeah, there's more. Yeah, the darker gold on the bottom, that's the developed world. That's the northern countries. So all of that comes from the global south.
Industrialized regions is the politically correct term, George.
What did you say?
Industrialized. It says here, industrialized regions is the politically correct term.
Yeah. Industrialized regions. The problem is there is no, well, like Anders Gunther Frank said decades ago, capitalism is everywhere. There is no such thing as non-industrialized areas anymore. That's what I drive around and look at when I'm, driving around looking at stuff. All right.
Maybe I'll leave a link to one of the videos of you discussing a tour in the Southeast Asia. Where was it that you went? Laos? Was it Laos that you did?
Laos and Cambodia to look at the Agent Orange sites.
You were talking about printing money out of thin air, and all that stuff, and that reminded me of these two that were sent in chat. Bank of International Settlements by accident,
Yeah.
looks like this. And the other one is the European Parliament. It has, it's just coincidence. George, anything you want to say as I play the music and we do this outro?
Well, I've been to Basel, but I never made it down to Babel.
Let's hope none of us do. On that note, everyone, have a good one.
My friends like going around and doing world tourism.
George, we'll be right back. Everyone, see you soon. Peace out.